ask you a question, just answer. Because you know what happens so often? People ask me a question. So now what? I'm going to answer, but 1 second. I want you to think highly of me after I answer this. So I'm going to answer it, saying it in a certain way, couching it in certain ways. This is what you like to hear. This is what the world likes to hear. And the whole thing is so artificial. The whole thing is so artificial. He says, Nimtses, Shechuvascha osef shal ruach me'aber ruchos ha'olam. You know what an answer like that is? It's a lot of wind. It's a lot of wind. You know what it's like? You remember when you're in high school? And you didn't know the answer, Akiva, this is a good strategy if you need to use it, right? Or don't use it, right? And you don't know the answer to something. You have an essay question, you don't know the answer. We'll say, what do you do? You just keep writing. Right? What you just do is you state the same thing over 15 different times, fill up the paragraph, you've said nothing. Maybe there's like one little nugget of information over there. What you're counting on is that the teacher is just going to be so tired by the time. I'm sorry? Smichas Charav. I know. That's why most of it is multiple choice, right? That's like so. Actually, surprisingly enough, no one does it in Smichas Chaburah, which is actually quite amazing. Really quite amazing. So point over here is, so sometimes, we're just using words, and there's no tochen to it. There's no tochen to it. He says, it turns out that what's my answer? My answer is often, he says, literally a combination of the four winds of the earth. It's just a lot of wind. Just a lot of wind, just a lot of talk and very little substance. He goes on, so that's number one. Someone will say is ultimately, again, is to be a pashut person. How do you become a pashut person? So we'll say the first step in pashtus is simple and straightforward dialogue. Simple and straightforward dialogue. Right? So we'll say, so just, simple and straightforward dialogue. So I'll say, this, in other words, what that means, what are we trying to achieve through simple and straightforward dialogue? Honesty in relationships. Pashtos. You know what ends up happening? When you go ahead and you make things complex, there's so much energy invested into structuring and crafting your answer to be the this, and the that, and the this, and the that. By the time you finish answering, how do you feel? Like, I'm exhausted. It's been this, so all of my energy is going to building up levels of complexity because I'm assuming that someone wants to hear things a certain way. Instead of just being pashut, being straightforward, being direct, of course in a nice, beautiful, tamimistic way. And again, that's pashtus. When you're pashut, says the Piazetzna, that allows ultimately, again, for greater connection with Machshava, and therefore soulful expansiveness. Next, Reishis Kol, Tana Beretzinos, Hernst, Kashem Levavcha Betmimus Upashtos, Ubesechlecha Tishamish Rak Lahavchin, Im Ein Chata Betshuvazu. He's along the same theme. Answer directly, answer with excitement, right? Answer with excitement, and only use your intellect to figure out whether or not what you're saying is correct or incorrect. Aval gam sichlecha izeh yeh pashut uritzini min kli shimush yesira. Fine. So we'll say so. Skip a little bit. So we'll say so good. So this is first step, right? So we'll say I just want to point out. So this is very exciting because we'll say, this idea of being a pashut Jew, a pashut Yid. So let's say, when we use that term pashut Yid, how is it often used? It's a pashut Yid. It's kind of like, it's like, it's a pashut Yid, like a simple Jew. And usually, it's not a compliment. Let's say, the Piazetzna says, there is no greater compliment in this world than being a pashut Yid. No greater compliment. Right? Ultimately, again, to be a simple person, to be a simple human being, to be almost a little bit more childlike in my interactions. And I will say, by the way, how much better would our relationships be if all of us were just pashut? You know that what I'm telling you is MS. I'm not trying to sell you something or do something or get you to believe something. I'm just telling you something. And that's all it is. What you see is what you will say. I mentioned this before. I remember that there were a couple of summers that my brother and my cousins and I were zocha to spend with my grandparents. They lived in Vineland, New Jersey. So after the war, and my grandfather was a chicken farmer for a good number of years. By the time we were kids, already they sold off the farm. I mean, they had the farm, but didn't really have the chickens. So we used to go with my grandfather to shul every morning because they had a farm. They had like acres and acres of land. So that's where we used to go in the summer. And after davening, we'd come home, and grandmother would make breakfast, and we would learn together. I'll never forget, I don't know how old I was. I must have been a kid, but I was a kid. And they had just come out with the Talmud Gemaras. Talmud Gemaras. So remember Talmud? See, you see, all of you are too young. You know Oz V'Hadar. Before Oz V'Hadar, right? Before Oz V'Hadar, like they have all the psukim and everything in there, there was Talmud. Talmud Gemaras were the first to bold the highlights, the Divrei HaMaschils of Rashi. Right, before Talmud, when I was a child in the shtetl, right, we had to go ahead, we had to find the, right, you want to find the Rashi? It looks like everything, right? Talmud came along, and it was like, oh my gosh, Mashiach is on his way. You could find the Rashi, you could find the Rashi. So I remember when I showed it to my grandfather was very disappointed in it. He said, this was his expression, he said, Amelos matehei aleha. What is going to happen to effort in learning, right? If the Rashi is, if you don't even have to look for Rashi, right? Then what effort is left in learning? Okay, so I say, right, I'm sorry?
I was told that with art.
It was art scroll. All right, so again, and that was reflective of definitely I remember one of the things he said is that we were learning a particular Mishnayos, and I asked my grandfather, I said to him, the reason, because I don't remember what we were learning, but I asked him the reason for something that we learned. And his answer was, Shtait in the Torah. It says it in the Torah. And I remember as a kid, I thought to myself, he probably doesn't know the answer. So he's just telling me, it says in the Torah. And it's only once I got older that I realized he knew, he was a Talmud Chacham, he knew the answer. He was trying to teach us Pashtos. That what does it mean? And my grandfather learned in Nervada. My grandfather learns, what does it mean to be a Pashat Yid? Shtei in the Torah. Who first of all, who says it's your job to understand everything? Who says it's your job to be complex and to know obviously he's talking also to children, so he's trying to condition us, I think, in a certain way. A Pashtos. It says in the Torah. It says in the Torah. And I will say, you know what? That has stayed with me my entire life. And I will tell you that my most incredible spiritual moments are moments of pashtos and never moments of complexity. They're moments when you let the intellectual guard down and you're not sophisticated or this, or I'm cogitating, the interface between divine justice and divine kindness, and how does God run the world, and what about the planets and evolution and the big. For me, no his orders comes from that. You lower the intellect. You say, you know what? I'm not thinking. I'm just going to feel. And suddenly, the tidal wave of Ruchnius comes over to you. I will say, that's what it means to be a Pashat Yid. That's what it means to be a simple Jew. To be a Pashat Yid means to be a child. I will say, isn't this incredible? I'm learning all of this. And what does the PhD that tells me? Be a child. Be a child. I'll end off with this. There's a lot of stories tonight. I told this story. I don't know, I didn't tell a story. When we used to live on Wallace Avenue, I don't know if you remember, there used to be that ice cream truck that used to come down the street. What is it?
Fresh cigarettes?
Yeah. What's the name? Not Dove, something, I don't know. It was a name for an ice cream truck. So every night, so we'd be sitting by dinner time, and we would hear the truck, we'd hear the music, whatever, right? And so, okay, and my youngest, and now she's 14, but my youngest, Nechama, was always like, Tati, can we go out for ice cream? So, all right, by the time usually we got out, it was going already fine, right? Unfortunately, right? I had to go to the mikveh, it's achonis for the ice cream truck. So one time, okay, we figured out the timing. So I said, okay, we're gonna go. We heard the first, no. Okay, go, let's go. All right, so we're out there. So it's like, this thing, to call it an ice cream truck is an exaggeration. It was a converted 16-seater van with an air conditioning unit stooped into the back window, right? They took out a bunch of seats, and this was and I said out, I'm like, this is the saddest thing I've ever seen. And my nechama was like, Tati, it's so pretty. And I'll tell you, it was such a musser in that moment. I came back in and I said to my wife, I said, I wish I had Nechama's eyes. Like, I'm seeing the world like this sarcastic adult. Like, seriously, buddy, that's the best you got. If you're going to be the ice cream guy, take it seriously enough to get yourself a proper vehicle. Right? Come on, seriously. Right? Seriously. Right? Or you can put 2 coolers on a bike and just drive down the street also. You can do the same thing. Right? So I'm like, I don't know, part of myself, like, I'm making jokes. I'm thinking about how I'm going to tell it over. I'm going to this, that. And meanwhile, my daughter's like, this is great. This is great. Chaburah said that's the difference between being a complex adult and a simple child. What the Piaget says is we have to simplify in life. We have to decomplex in life. We make so many things so incredibly complicated. We make Yiddishkeit complicated. We make marriage complicated. We make friendships complicated. We make Kehillah complicated. We make everything complicated. And the goal, says the Piaget, is just be pashut. Just be pashut. Be pashut like a child. Now, the first example of pashtus that he's giving ultimately is in conversation, how you talk. Just be a straightforward and honest person. Just say what you mean. Be the kind of person. We'll say, we all know people who that when they tell you something, it's absolutely true. We'll say, do you know why we remember those people? Do you know why? Because they are far and few between. Few and far between. Right? Because most people, when they say something, they're like, okay, what do you want? Right? What is it? What is it? And if dialogue just became pashut, like children, just open and upfront and honest, then I say, suddenly again, I become a simpler person. What the Piaget says, when you become a simpler person, so that is the first step in putting the neshama in the driver's seat of life. Suddenly the neshama's driving the ship. And if the neshama's driving the ship, ultimately again, I have a much better chance of achieving mindfulness and ultimately allowing the neshama to be expansive and the dominant force of my life. So we'll have to stop over here for tonight. Apologize, a lot of stories tonight. But what I do want to point out is coming attractions. Coming attraction is next. I have to make a strategic decision about whether or not to switch to Inyane Pesach. I'm not sure. I mean, not like it's going to throw off our timeline on this all that much, right? Yes, I guess, yeah. So I will tell you, the next section in here, Abba says, where he discusses the things that hold us back from being pashut. So I was hoping to get to it tonight, but already it's not enough for us. It's not over tonight. I was hoping to get to it tonight, but I think maybe we'll continue one more week before Pesach with this, because when's Rosh Chodesh? Oh, Thursday. Okay, fine. We'll figure out what we're going to do. But that's the coming attraction. So now that we've established, right, pashtus, that's the goal. Now we're going to talk and how to achieve a level of pashtus, or at least in one area. Now we're going to talk about the pitfalls to pashtus. And next week, Shabbosai. Shkoyach.